If you're enjoying this video, smash that like button, subscribe, hit the bell and share it with your friends, and let me know in the comments where are you watching from. Every like and subscribe helps the channel grow. The sun had just dipped. Below the horizon, painting the sky with deep orange and purple hues. Jack had been on the road for hours, his rig humming steadily beneath him as the miles stretched on in front of him, endless and lonely. They say the highway changes you if you stay on it too long, that the asphalt soaks up your soul like spilled oil, and someday you just disappear between the white lines. I didn't believe any of it back then. I was just a man trying to make a living, a wheelman, a hauler. Another ghost on the endless American roads. I started young, 19 years old, barely knew which way was north, chasing the dream of freedom. No bosses breathing down your neck, no punching clocks, no crowds, just you, the diesel engines, low rumble, and a horizon that never stopped stretching out in front of you. My first truck was a battered 1993 Kenworth W900, cherry red paint peeling off the hood. Smelled like old coffee and colder cigarettes. I loved that damn thing like a loyal dog. I'd sleep in the bunk with a pocket knife under my pillow and the CB crackling softly in the background like lullabies. Back then the road felt alive, but in a good way. The hum of the tires on asphalt was like a song. Lonely, yeah, but peaceful. I didn't know yet that loneliness can rot into something worse, that if you listen too long to the road's music, you start hearing other notes underneath. Whispers, static, things that ain't part of any earthly melody. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The first time something strange happened was about 3 years in. I was hauling rebar out of Arkansas, headed west on I-40, late at night. Fog rolling so thick it swallowed the world whole. My headlights barely cut a cone through the mist, and every shadow on the roadside seemed to shift when I wasn't looking straight at it. I was tired, sure. I hadn't slept in about 20 hours. But tiredness don't explain what I saw. There was a shape up ahead, lying across the highway. At first I thought it was a deer. Happens all the time. Big buck runs out, gets clipped, leaves a mess. But as I slowed down, creeping closer, I realized it wasn't a deer, wasn't any animal I knew. The body was long, too long, and twisted wrong like the joints had been, dislocated and jammed back in at the wrong angles. It had arms, not legs, arms, sprawled out across the road, fingers twitching. One of the hands scraped against the asphalt as I rolled past. I looked straight at its face, and it looked back at me, a man's face but stretched thin as leather, the skin so tight over the bones it looked ready to split, eyes black, bottomless. It smiled, not in greeting, in recognition, like it knew me. I didn't stop, I didn't even slow more than I had to. I gunned the engine and roared past that thing, not daring to look in my mirrors, heart jackhammering so hard against my ribs it felt like I might pass out. When I finally dared to glance back, just a quick flick of my eyes, the road was empty. No fog, no body, nothing. Just smooth blacktop, stretching out behind me like a river of tar. I told myself it was exhaustion, hallucination, maybe even just a trick of the light. But somewhere deep inside, a little voice whispered, "It saw you." Over the next few months, it kept getting worse. Weird lights hovering over cornfields at night, signs pointing to towns that didn't exist on any map, gas stations that flickered in and out of sight when I blinked, and the feeling, that rotten, wormy feeling, that someone was always watching from the shoulder of the road. I started drinking more coffee, stopped sleeping for more than an hour or two at a time. Didn't help. If anything, it made things worse. The less I slept, the more. I saw one night, deep in West Texas, long straight stretches of nothing for 100 miles in any direction. I pulled into a little truck stop that wasn't on my GPS. No name on the sign, just a red neon open buzzing like a fly. I needed diesel. Needed a break. Figured, what the hell? I pulled in, shut off the engine, climbed down from the cab. The air was too still, no bugs chirping, no wind. The lights overhead flickered like dying stars. Inside, the place looked like it hadn't changed since the 70s. Yellowed linoleum floors, wood paneling, dust hanging so thick you could taste it. The woman behind the counter watched me walk in, didn't blink, didn't move, just stared. Her eyes were too wide, too dry, like she'd forgotten how to be human. I paid cash for a tank of diesel and a cup of black coffee that tasted like burnt rubber. When I walked back outside, my truck was gone. I stood there for a long time, holding that cheap paper cup, staring at the empty parking lot. No skid marks. No engine noise fading into the distance. Just nothing. And then, way down the highway, I saw taillights. Twin red pinpricks, blinking in the darkness, and they were moving away from me. Fast. I ran. I don't even remember making the decision. Just pure dumb instinct. I ran down the highway after those lights, coffee spilling down my shirt, boots slapping against the cracked pavement. The lights kept getting smaller. I screamed, cursed, begged. Nothing. Just when I thought I'd lose them forever, the lights stopped. Not like brake lights. Just stopped. Frozen. Waiting. When I finally caught up, gasping for breath, legs burning, I realized it wasn't my truck after all. It was an old Mack, rusted out, paint peeling like scabs. The cab was empty, but the driver's side door was hanging open, and inside, something was waiting. Something leaning just out of sight, something whispering my name. I didn't go closer. Not then. I turned around and walked back to the truck stop. When I got there, my truck was parked exactly where I'd left it. Engine idling. Door open. Keys still in the ignition. The woman behind. The counter smiled at me through the cracked window. Her teeth were all wrong, too many. Too sharp. I didn't go back inside the truck stop. Hell, I didn't even look at that woman again. I climbed back into my truck, slammed the door, and locked it. Sat there for a long time, engine humming, headlights burning twin holes into the empty highway. The coffee had gone cold in my hand. I didn't remember still holding it. I tossed it onto the floor, started shifting gears. I needed to move anywhere but here. The highway rolled out in front of me, empty and silent. After a few miles, the sky started lightening at the edges. A weak, watery dawn trying to crawl its way across the plains, but the sun never really came up. The sky just stayed grey, like a film of dust had been stretched across the heavens. My hands ached on the wheel. Every mile felt wrong, like I was driving deeper into some place I wasn't supposed to be. The towns got stranger too. Little gas stations with hand-painted signs, broken motels squatting on the side of the road like wounded animals. Billboards advertising things I couldn't quite understand. The crossing is near. Are you ready? Midnight Freight Co. We deliver beyond the horizon. And people, standing by the roadside, watching, always watching, their faces blurred, their bodies still as scarecrows. No thumbs out, no signs, just staring, waiting. By the third day, I stopped seeing other trucks altogether. No headlights coming the further way. No taillights ahead of me, just me, the endless grey sky. And the watchers. It started playing tricks on my mind. I'd see my old Kenworth reflected in the chrome of a signpost, except it wasn't my Kenworth anymore. It was a twisted version of it. Longer, lower, black smoke pouring from the stacks, even though I wasn't touching the pedal. Sometimes I'd look in the mirror and swear there was someone sitting in the passenger seat, just for a second, a flicker of a shape. Blurred and writhing like smoke. Every time I whipped my head around, nothing. Just empty seat, empty cab, empty road. Sleep became impossible. I'd pull off at some broken-down rest area, always abandoned, always eerily clean, and close. My eyes for an hour. But I never really slept. Every time I drifted off, I'd dream of the road swallowing me, tires melting into the pavement, hands reaching up from the cracks to drag me down, down, down. I started talking to myself, just to hear a voice. Sometimes I'd even talk to the CB and no one ever answered, or almost no one. One night, it must have been a week in, I heard it, a voice crackling over the dead air. At first it was just static, then a whisper. Breaker. Breaker. You out there, friend? I grabbed the mic so fast I almost dropped it. Yeah. I'm here. Who's this? More static. Then the voice again. Low, drawling, cracked with age. You don't belong here, son. The hair on the back of my neck stood straight up. Where's here? I asked. The voice chuckled. a dry, rasping sound like paper tearing. You'll find out soon enough. You keep driving west. Another long burst of static, then a final word, almost too faint to hear. Crossroads. And the channel went dead again. I tried switching frequencies. Nothing, just the endless hiss of the void. I drove in silence after that, mile after mile, hour after hour. The landscape started changing. The trees, when there were trees, looked wrong, too tall, bark the color of dried blood, leaves that shimmered in colors I couldn't name. The towns were worse. I passed one place called Charon. Population. That's what the sign said. 3 question marks, no lights, no cars, no people, at least none I could see. But as I rolled past, I could feel them. Eyes, hundreds of eyes, watching from the windows, smiling, waiting. I kept telling myself, just keep driving. There's got to be an end, got to be a way back. But in my gut, I knew better. Somewhere back there, when I stopped at that nameless truck stop, I crossed a line. A line you don't uncross. The dreams got worse. I started seeing a man, or something like a man, standing in the middle of the road ahead of me, always the same. Dressed in an old black suit, battered fedora pulled low. No face, just smooth, featureless skin, where his eyes, mouth, and nose should be. He never moved, never flinched. Sometimes I'd drive straight through him, and he'd burst into a cloud of ash. Sometimes I'd swerve around him, and see him again a mile later, waiting. Sometimes I'd blink, and he'd be sitting in the passenger seat, hands folded neatly in his lap. Just sitting, silent, waiting. One night, or what passed for night under that grey sky, I saw a convoy up ahead. Real trucks, 3 of them. Big rigs with flatbeds, trailers, tankers, real people. Real lights. I nearly cried with relief. I gunned the engine, caught up fast. As I got closer, I saw they all bore the same logo, Midnight Freight Co. That name again. The trailers were matte black. No plates, no markings. Their tires didn't seem to touch the road, like they were floating an inch above the pavement. I pulled up alongside the lead rig, honked. The driver didn't look at me, didn't even twitch. I swear to God he didn't have a face either, just skin stretched tight over a skull. The truck rolled on, oblivious. I slowed down, let them pull away, watched as their tail lights faded into the mist, and for the first time, I realized I wasn't following the road anymore. The road was following me. That night, parked on the shoulder, trying to choke down a sandwich that tasted like ash, I heard another voice crackle through the CB. But this one wasn't human. Not. Even close, the voice was deep, vibrating, full of gravel and broken glass. It said one word soon. Then laughter. Low, guttural, endless. The kind of laughter that makes your teeth ache. I ripped the CB out of its socket, threw it into the sleeper cab behind me. Didn't matter. The laughter kept going, long after the radio was dead, long after I drove away. It followed me. It's still following me. Somewhere along the way, I lost track of time. Days bled into each other like spilled oil. I couldn't remember the last time I ate something real, or slept more than an hour, or spoke to another living person. My phone was useless, no signal. The gauges on the dashboard spun crazily, measuring things I didn't recognize. The temperature gauge read fading, the fuel gauge read drifting, the odometer just blinked, and outside the world kept getting stranger. I passed a town with no buildings, just graves, mile after mile of tombstones stretching out across the fields, names carved deep in cracked marble, names that looked familiar. My parents, old friends, myself. Dates of death marked a week ahead of the present day. I didn't stop, didn't dare. The watchers were waiting between the graves, smiling. The next night, I saw the crossroads. I knew it without anyone telling me. 4 roads intersecting in the middle of nothing. No signs, no lights, just darkness yawning in every direction. And at the center, a single figure, waiting. The man in the black suit, hat. Pulled low, no face. I slammed on the brakes, screeched to a halt 50 feet away. The figure didn't move, didn't flinch, just pointed. One bony finger, aimed west, down a road that didn't exist until that moment. A road that shimmered and shifted, made of something darker than tar, something alive. I should have turned around. I should have run. But I didn't. I shifted into gear, and I drove. Because that's what you do out here. You drive. You drive until the road eats you whole. The new road swallowed me whole. The pavement wasn't pavement anymore. It pulsed beneath my tires. Like breathing skin, the lines on the asphalt twisted when I wasn't looking, curling into strange knotwork patterns. I kept my hands locked on the wheel, kept my eyes straight ahead. Didn't look in the mirrors anymore. Not after what I thought. I saw back there dozens of faces pressed against the sleeper cab window, mouths open in silent screams. The world changed around me. No more trees, no more towns. Just endless, flat darkness, like driving across the bottom of an ocean drained dry. Daffyré. Only light was my headlights carving two pale tunnels into the black. But sometimes, I saw shapes moving just at the edges, tall spindly things, long arms, longer fingers, dragging along the dead earth. They never crossed into the headlights, but they followed. God help me. They followed. I drove until the fuel gauge, still blinking. Drifting, finally hit empty. The truck coughed, sputtered, and died. The lights went out. The heater fell silent. I sat there in the dark, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles cracked. Silence pressed down on the cab. Thick, heavy, smothering, and then a knock, soft, on the driver's side door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I didn't look. I couldn't. If I looked, I knew. Something worse would happen. Another knock, this time on the passenger side. Closer, faster, knuckles rapping against. The glass playful. I shut my eyes, held my breath, waited. The knocking stopped. The world held its breath with me. And then, a whisper, so close to my ear, it made the hair on my arms stand straight up. Let us in. I don't know how long I stayed like that. Hours maybe longer. At some point the sun rose or something like it, a grey, sickly light that oozed up from the horizon, turning the world the colour of spoiled milk. The truck's engine roared, back to life on its own. The gauges spun wildly. The headlights flickered back on, and the road in front of me, the living, breathing road, had stretched out again, beckoning. I shifted into gear. I drove, because there was nothing else to do. Miles passed, or maybe years. Time didn't work right out here. Sometimes I'd see a town flicker on the horizon, towers of glass and steel reaching into the sky, only to crumble into dust when I got closer. Other times I'd pass a gas station glowing in the twilight, pumps weeping black sludge, the attendants waving slowly with arms too long, fingers brushing the ground. Once I stopped at one. I don't remember deciding to, just found myself pulling in. The pump slid into my tank like a needle into a vein. The numbers on the readout spun, blood, tears, memories. I didn't look at the attendant, paid with a handful of old coins I didn't remember having. Drove away without looking back. I think if I'd stayed, I'd be part of that station now. Another thing trapped between here and nowhere. The CB crackled again days later, a new voice. This one was a man, or what used to be a man. Raspy, broken, full of static. "You're almost there, boy," it said. "Ain't no turning back now." I pressed the button down, my voice came out a dry croak. "Where am I going?" The voice laughed, not mocking, sad. "Same place we all go. When the road's done with us," I started, seeing the signs then. Rusty things, nailed to invisible posts, swaying in the dead air. "Welcome to perdition. Last exit. No return. Dead end. Souls only." Sometimes the signs would flash messages just for me. "We remember you. You were always meant for this." One night, and if you can call it night, I passed a graveyard made entirely of trucks. Hundreds of them rotting in rows, cabs torn open like the shells of dead insects, license plates hanging from broken bumpers like dog tags. I recognized some of the rigs. Names and call signs scrawled across the doors, guys I'd heard about on the CB back in the real world. guys who'd gone missing without a trace. I realized then, nobody really disappears out here. They just get forgotten, absorbed, swallowed. I started hearing them at night, the other drivers, whispering across the void. Not on the radio, not in the wind, in my mind, telling their stories, confessing, begging, warning. There was old Jimmy Lane, who took a shortcut through the Sangre de Cristo mountains one winter and never came back. There was Maria Cantu, last seen hauling cattle out of Laredo, except the cattle weren't cattle anymore by the time she reached the border. There was Big Ron Parsons, who answered a voice calling from the way station scales and never saw the sun again. All of them, telling me the same thing over and over. Don't stop, don't look, don't listen. But it was getting harder. The road was slowing me down, making me tired, making me want to pull over, just for a little while. Just close my eyes, just rest. That's how it gets you. Not with fear, with exhaustion, with the lure of sleep. The last town I passed had no name, just a single sign written in letters that bled home. The houses were all wrong. Too tall, windows too wide, front doors swinging open and shut in a wind I couldn't feel. Figures stood in the yards, families, but not human. Their faces were blank white ovals, their hands ended in points. They waved at me as I passed, their mouths opened wide and gaping black holes, and they sang a lullaby, sweet and low, calling me home. I mashed the gas pedal down, didn't look back, didn't listen, but the song stuck in my head anyway, even now. Sometimes late at night, I find myself humming it without thinking, a song I never learned, a song I'll never forget. The horizon never gets closer out here, no matter how fast you drive, no matter how long. The road stretches on forever, and every mile, I feel myself slipping a little more, forgetting a little more, who I was, where I came from, why I ever left in the first place. Maybe that's the real horror, not the monsters, not the watchers, not the endless dark, but the slow, soft erasure of everything. That makes you you, until one day you're just another truck on the endless highway, lights flickering, horn silent, eyes blank, rolling forever toward nowhere. And when you pass a truck like that, late at night on some lonely stretch of road, you might feel a cold wind slip through your cab. You might hear a voice whisper from your CB just for a second. Turn back while you still can. But you won't, you'll keep driving because that's what we do. That's all we know out here on the last highway, where the only exit is death, and even that's not a guarantee. The road didn't end, it never ends, it just changes. At some point the sky overhead cracked wide open, not like a sunrise, not like a storm, like old skin tearing. Through the split I could see something, a color my mind couldn't hold on to, shifting, twisting. It poured out over the world, like smoke underwater, and the horizon started melting, mountains drooping like wax under a hot light, towns stretching thin, dripping down into the ground. I kept my foot on the gas, eyes forward, hands locked on the wheel, because I knew if I even blinked too long, I'd never be able to look away again. The CB flickered to life. A different voice now. Woman's voice. Soft, soothing, almost like singing. Exit ahead. You are so close. I shook my head. No exits, I muttered. Not falling for that. But up ahead, there it was. A ramp curling off the highway, lit with old buzzing yellow lights, leading down, 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 to a place that shimmered and shifted like heat haze. I felt the wheel start to turn on its own. Veering me toward it, I fought it, pulled back with everything I had. The wheel fought me, twisting under my fingers like a living thing. I slammed my fist against the dashboard. Not yet, I screamed. The truck shuddered, the tires squealed, but I stayed straight, I stayed on the highway. The ramp slipped past, gone, vanished, as if it had never been there at all, but not before I saw what waited at the bottom. A town made of bone, a city made of mouths, a welcome sign that simply said, "You belong to us now," hours passed, days, years. No way to tell anymore. I drove under skies that wept black rain, through deserts of shattered glass, across oceans of dry, whispering bones. Sometimes I saw other trucks, flickering in and out of existence. Sometimes I saw things worse. Bridges. That stretched out across nothing, swaying and creaking under invisible winds. Tunnels that burrowed down into the earth, where the walls were made of teeth. I never stopped. I never looked. I never listened. Not even when I heard voices calling my name from the mirrors. Not even when I saw my own reflection waving at me, beckoning me to pull over. Sleep? Forget it. I tried once, pulled over onto a shoulder that didn't really exist, killed the engine, climbed into the sleeper cab, closed my eyes, and dreamed. Not dreams, really. Memories. But wrong. Twisted. I saw my hometown, but the streets were full of water, and the people floated past, staring up at me with empty sockets. I saw my mother's face, but her mouth stretched too wide, teeth shining like broken glass. I saw myself, standing at the foot of my bed, watching, waiting, smiling. I woke up, screaming. The cab was full of smoke. The radio was crackling. "You can't rest here, keep moving." So I did. I drove. Tires screaming over a road that was less and less real every mile. The watchers got bolder. They didn't just stand by the roadside anymore. Now they chased the truck, running on all fours, twisting, writhing. Sometimes they'd leap at the cab, long spidery arms slamming against the doors, leaving streaks of black ichor. I never stopped. Not once. If I did, I knew they'd get in. And if they got in, well, no one would be left behind the wheel. The signs started changing. They didn't even pretend anymore. No hope. Nothing ahead. You were warned. And my personal favorite, welcome home, driver. The trucks I passed weren't empty anymore. Either. I could see them through the windshields. Other drivers, or what was left of them. Faces hollowed out, eyes burning like coals, hands fused to the wheel, mouths moving in silent prayers. I wondered if they saw me too, if they thought, poor bastard. Doesn't know he's already dead. Or maybe they envied me, still fighting, still pretending there was a way out. The road narrowed, the sky darkened. The world squeezed tighter and tighter around me, like the whole universe was funneling me towards something, a destination, an ending. Thought about the woman back at the truck stop. That smile, that knowing look. She wasn't warning me. She was welcoming me, a new member of their endless convoy. Finally, the highway ended, just stopped, dead a cliff, dropping off into infinite blackness. No stars, no light, no sound, just the void, and standing there, right at the edge, waiting for me. The man in the black suit, no face, no eyes, no mouth, just a presence, solid and heavy. He raised one hand, pointed down, pointed into the abyss. No words needed. I understood. The ride's over. The road's done with you. Time to finish the journey. I hit the brakes, screeched to a halt, just feet from the edge. The truck rocked, groaned, settled. The man in the suit tilted his head, curious, waiting. I stared into the blackness, thought about stepping out, thought about leaving the truck behind and walking into the dark. It would be easy, so easy. Just one step, one fall, one end. But somewhere, deep down, in a part of me, the road hadn't devoured yet. Something sparked, something stubborn, something human. I shook my head. "No," I said aloud, "I'm not done yet." I cranked the wheel, shifted into reverse and backed away from the cliff. The man in the suit didn't move, didn't stop me, just watched as I turned the truck around and drove back the way I came, back into the endless night, back into the whispering. Dark, I'm still out here, still driving. No map, no destination, no hope, but I'm not giving up, not yet. Because maybe, I'm just maybe, if I drive far enough, if I hold on long enough, I'll find a crack, a seam, a way back to the world I lost, and if not, well, at least I'll go down fighting, 1 mile at a time, one nightmare at a time, one broken dawn at a time. So if you're out on the highway late some night, if you see a battered, old Kenworth rolling through the mist, if you hear a faint voice crackling through your CB whispering, "Keep going, don't stop, don't listen," do yourself a favor. Listen. Because the road's always hungry, and it's always looking for new. Blood? I don't know how long it's been now, days, weeks, years. Time doesn't work the same out here. It slips through your fingers like smoke. There are no clocks on the dash anymore, just the endless ticking of something mechanical and broken inside the dashboard, like a dying heartbeat. Only constants are the road and the truck, and the things that wait along the way. The first new thing I saw after turning back from the cliff was a sign. Big old, warped by the weather of whatever this place called weather. It said, "The last gas station open 25 hours. 25 hours. I chuckled to myself, a dry, hollow sound. Even my sense of humor was rotting away. I told myself I wouldn't stop. Told myself 100 times. But the fuel gauge was dropping again, lower and lower, below empty past it. The truck shuddered. Engine coughing. And somehow I knew this wasn't the kind of place you could just pass by, not if you wanted to keep going. The gas station appeared like a mirage, lights flickering overhead, neon buzzing and sputtering. The building itself leaned, at impossible angles like a photograph caught mid-fall. There were trucks parked at the pumps, at least. Things that used to be trucks, twisted, broken. Their frames melded into the blacktop like they were sinking or growing roots. I pulled in anyway, because that's what this place wanted, because that's what the road demanded. The pump hissed when I grabbed it. A thick, slow hiss like a snake coiling around my wrist. The fuel wasn't fuel. Thicker, darker, smelled like burning rubber and grave dirt. But I jammed it into the tank and squeezed the trigger. The truck groaned, the gauge twitched upward, and when I was done, I turned toward the building, toward the convenience store. Because of course I did. Because you can't leave these places without going inside. The bell over the door didn't ring. It screamed, just once, short and sharp. Inside, the shelves were full of things that almost looked like food, cans with labels that shifted when you tried to read them, plastic-wrapped packages that twitched and pulsed under your hands. I didn't touch anything, didn't dare, not even when the figure behind the counter called out to me, "Need anything else, driver?" I looked up, regretted it immediately. The clerk had no face, just a wide, gaping hole where its head should be. From deep inside the void, something glittered, teeth maybe, or stars, or both. It wore a uniform, blue shirt, name tag reading, "Howdy," and a paper hat smeared with something dark. I shook my head. "No," I croaked, "just the gas." It chuckled, a sound like dry leaves rustling. "You're lucky, you know," it said. "Not everyone gets a second chance." I didn't ask what that meant, didn't want to know. I threw a handful of whatever coins were in my pocket onto the counter and backed out of the store. The bell screamed again behind me. Back in the truck, I pulled onto the road without looking. Back. You never look back. Not here. The miles kept falling away. The highway narrowed even more. Sometimes it wasn't paved anymore. Sometimes it was bone. Sometimes it was teeth. Sometimes it was a ribbon of molten tar that hissed and steamed under. The tires, the truck didn't care, it just kept moving. So did. The radio found me again. Different voice this time, deeper, older, creaking like old wood. "Freight 66 to Freight 9. You still out there, brother?" I didn't answer. Not at first, didn't trust it. But loneliness gnaws at you worse than any monster. Eventually, I thumbed the mic. "Yeah, still here." Static buzzed. Then the voice came back. "Good, you're getting close." Close to what? No answer, just static. And underneath it, a faint sound. Music, old country. A song I knew but couldn't place. It made my skin crawl. Hours later, maybe days, I saw lights up ahead. Not just one or two, hundreds. A convoy, trucks, big rigs, semis, all shapes and sizes, stretching out across the plain like a migrating herd. Their headlights burned through the darkness, carving tunnels of pale gold through the black. And they were moving slowly, endlessly, like a river of steel and rubber and bone. I hesitated, slowed down. Something primal in me screamed to turn back, but the road narrowed again. There was no shoulder, no exit. no escape. I had to join them, had to merge, or get crushed under their wheels. When I pulled in behind the last rig, my headlights illuminated its rear doors, painted on them, in big bleeding letters, "No cargo, no purpose." My hands trembled. On the wheel, because that's what this was, wasn't it? The endless haul, no cargo, no delivery, just the drive. Forever. I merged into the convoy and felt it, a tugging at my mind, a thinning of my soul, like something was siphoning pieces of me away, bit by bit, mile by mile. I gritted my teeth, clenched. The wheel, focused on breathing, on staying me, because once you forget who you are out here, you're done. You're part of the convoy, another empty rig rolling toward nowhere. The trucks around me weren't empty. I caught glimpses through their cracked windows, shapes in the cabs, some human, most not, twisted things, fused to their seats. Eyes, blank, mouths open, moaning silently as the engines dragged them onward. Some of them noticed me, turned their heads, smiled, inviting me, welcoming me, promising peace, an end to struggle. All I had to do was let go. I pressed the pedal down, pulled out of line, swerved hard. The other trucks didn't react, didn't chase, didn't even slow down, just kept rolling, 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 forever. I watched the endless line disappear into the mist behind me, and I kept driving, alone again but free. For now. The road ahead wasn't any kinder. The sky bled, the ground wept, the stars, when they appeared, formed words I couldn't read without bleeding from my eyes. But I was moving, still fighting, still me, and somewhere out there, beyond the next rise, beyond the next nightmare, maybe there was a way home. Maybe. After pulling away from the convoy, the road changed again. It always changes when you fight it. Like a living thing the highway doesn't like when you slip through its fingers. The lines on the pavement began to peel upward like old scabs. The blacktop cracked, split and folded inward, forming deep canyons and jagged scars that threatened to swallow the truck whole. I gripped the wheel so hard my knuckles cracked. I leaned forward over the dashboard, eyes burning, throat dry. "Not today," I whispered. The truck rumbled and bounced, tires scraping across edges of nothingness, barely hanging onto the thread of road that remained, and still I drove. The next thing I remember seeing was the moon. Except it wasn't the moon anymore. It was bigger, closer, wrong. It hung low in the sky like a gigantic rotting fruit, covered in weeping sores and blinking bloodshot eyes. Each eye stared straight down at the highway. Watching me, judging, waiting, and in its putrid glow, the world itself twisted. The trees leaned in, their trunks bending like knotted fingers. The rocks pulsed under the soil. The mountains in the distance heaved like sleeping beasts. The very air smelled of iron and decay. The CB crackled again. A voice. But not a stranger's this time. It was my own voice. "Come on back, Driver 9, it said. "You're almost there, almost home." I slapped the radio off, heart hammering in my chest. It didn't matter, the voice came again, but now it was inside the cab, inside my own head. "Just a little further. Don't fight it. You're tired. You've done enough." The windshield fogged up from my panicked breath. I rolled the window down, letting in the stinking, freezing wind. Focused on the road. Eyes forward. Always forward. That's the only rule that matters out here. I drove for what could have been forever. The landscapes blending into one endless nightmare, stitched together with hunger and rot. Then, just when I thought I couldn't take any more, I saw lights ahead, real lights. Golden steady, warm, a city, or what passed for one in this place. Buildings stretched up into the clouds, their windows glowing like stars trapped in glass. Road. Signs pointed toward the exit ramp. "Welcome to Freytown, home of the lost." My gut twisted into knots. Every instinct I had screamed to stay on the highway, but the truck had other ideas. It drifted toward the off-ramp like a tired old dog finding its way home. I didn't fight it. Not this time. The city was alive. Not in the way cities normally are, bustling with people and sound and movement. This place breathed. The streets heaved under the tires, the buildings leaned in when I passed, billboards blinked slogans at me. We never forget our own. Deliver yourself. One last stop. I didn't see any people, not at first. Just shadows. Shadows that flickered at the edges of my headlights. Shadows that slithered up the sides of buildings and melted into doorways. Watching, waiting, inviting Atty. The center of the city was a tower. Tall, twisting, impossible. Its walls made of crushed trucks, stacked and fused together. Their headlights still burned, even though many of them were decades old, their chrome skeletons rusted to dust. A wide, cracked ramp spiraled up the outside of the tower, a path clear as day, leading me up, leading me in. I knew, somehow, that every driver who came this way ended up here. It was the final destination, the terminus, the place where all lost roads end. I should have turned around. I should have slammed the gas and roared out of that city as fast as the truck could carry me, but I didn't, because I needed answers, because the not knowing was worse than death, because part of me, the part that was still human, still stupidly believed there, might be a way out. I started the climb. The ramp creaked under the weight of the truck. The city fell away beneath me, sprawling and writhing like a nest of worms. Higher and higher I climbed, until the ground was just a memory, until the stars overhead blurred and swam like fish in a dark sea. And at the very top, waiting for me, a loading dock, floodlights blinding. In the dark, and beyond it, a figure, a man or something close enough. He wore a black suit, no face, no eyes, no mouth, the same thing that had waited at the cliff. But this time, it wasn't pointing downward, it was reaching out, offering, inviting, a choice. I could feel it in my bones. Step out, surrender, become part of the tower, become part of the city. Find peace, or refuse, and pay the price. I sat there staring at him, through the windshield, engine idling, sweat dripping down my face, my heart a frantic drumbeat. The figure didn't move, didn't hurry me. The choice had to be mine. In the end, I did the only thing I could. I shifted into reverse. I backed away, slowly, carefully. The figure lowered its hand, tilted its head, almost sadly. The floodlights flickered, the tower trembled, and then the world shattered, the ramp crumbled under. Me concrete and steel ripping apart with a sound like the earth screaming. The truck fell, spinning, tumbling, falling through endless darkness. Not sky, not space. Something worse. Something alive. Its walls slick with mucus and hate. I don't know how. Long I fell. Could have been seconds, could have been centuries. When I finally hit bottom, it wasn't a crash. It was a landing. A new highway. A new stretch of endless road. This one even darker than before. The sky above pulsing like a dying heart. The lines on the pavement twisted into words I couldn't read. The CB crackled. A woman's voice, soft and low. "Welcome back, driver. Still stubborn, huh?" I laughed. Or maybe I cried. Hard to tell anymore. Hands on the wheel, eyes on the horizon. I pressed the gas. The truck rumbled forward into the dark, still moving, still fighting, still me, for now. Because that's the secret. No one tells you when you start driving these roads. There's no finish line, no final destination, no real escape. There's only the road, and how long you can survive on it. Mile after mile, night after night, nightmare after nightmare. And I swear, somewhere out there, just past the mist, just beyond East, where my headlights reach, there's still a way home. I just have to find it before the road finds me first. The road doesn't forgive. It just keeps stretching ahead, without end, without mercy. No matter how far I drive, how fast, it never seems to end. I'd started believing that maybe this was just how things worked now. The highway, the truck, the eternal road stretching out in front of me. Maybe it was all I'd ever known. Maybe I was just a part of it now, a thread in its fabric, like the other drivers I'd met, the ones who disappeared, lost to the asphalt, swallowed by the endless ribbon of blacktop. But then something changed. I can't tell you when it happened. 1 second. The road was its usual self, cracked, broken, covered in dirt and grime, edges curling into a soft blur of darkness. And the next? It was different. The air had thickened like someone had pulled a blanket over the world, muffling sound, trapping heat. The temperature dropped, but not in the way cold does when it's about to rain. It was the kind of chill that makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, like you're walking through a shadow that's too deep, too close to the bones. Something was wrong. Something had changed. Something watched. I didn't want to look in the rearview mirror. I knew better than that. But sometimes, you just can't help it. Sometimes, curiosity beats you, and when I glanced back, I saw nothing, at first. Just the road stretching endlessly behind me, empty and dark, but then a shimmer, a distortion. It was a figure, standing still on the side of the road. It had been there for who knows how long, but I hadn't seen it until now. It wasn't human, at least not in the way I understood it. The figure was tall, unnaturally so, like it had been stretched out of some kind of nightmare. Its limbs were too long, fingers too slender. It wore something like a coat, ripped, torn at the edges, but it was the face that made my blood run cold. There was no face, not really. Just a smooth, pale surface where features should have been. No eyes, no mouth. Just a void, deep enough to swallow everything. I don't know how long I stared at it. It felt like hours, but when I looked back to the front of the truck, the lights were blindingly bright, and the world around me seemed to shudder. I couldn't take my eyes off it for too long. There's a rule out here. You don't stop. You never stop. The truck rumbled beneath me, and I pressed the accelerator harder than I'd ever dared before. I could feel the tires skimming over the surface, as though the truck were barely tethered to the earth. I knew, with sickening clarity, that if I looked back again, the figure would be closer, and closer still, until it was at the cab window staring at me. But there was something worse than the figure behind me, something ahead. I passed the first sign that had been placed on this stretch of road. The letters were jagged, as if someone had carved them. Into the metal with something sharp, it read, "You will stop here." My breath caught in my throat. No. I shook my head, but it didn't matter. The sign disappeared in my rearview mirror, but the meaning of those words stayed with me, digging into my brain like a splinter. The highway twisted ahead. I didn't know what I expected, but the change came suddenly, without warning. The road shifted, the curves deepening, the land around me sinking. It was as if the highway was intentionally drawing me in, pulling me towards something I couldn't avoid. Up ahead, the lights of a truck stop flickered in the distance. It was like the haven of all lost travelers, but there was no comfort in it. I could feel the pull, the road, the truck, the entire existence I was trapped in. It wanted me to stop, but I kept my foot pressed firmly on the gas. Just keep driving, I told myself. Just keep moving. The truck stop grew closer. The lights buzzed, flickering. It was a place I didn't want to be. I knew that the second I entered, I'd never leave. I thought I saw faces in the shadows between the pump islands, watching me as I approached. The sight of them unsettled me, but it was too late now. There was no turning back. I pulled in. The truck stopped of its own accord, as if the engine had been waiting for this moment. A cold sweat ran down the back of my neck. I didn't get out at first. I just sat there. The silence was deafening. No sounds of engines running, no voices, just the occasional rustle of wind against paper-thin walls and broken windows. Eventually I opened the door. The gas station was unlike any other. It was older, the building sagging in the middle, as if it had been there longer than anything should have been allowed to stand. The paint was chipped, the windows cracked. The sign above the door read, "Welcome to home. Stay a while." I wasn't sure if it was an invitation or a command. Inside, the air smelled stale, the kind of damp smell that comes from rot hidden behind the walls. The fluorescent lights hummed with an eerie consistency. Everything inside seemed to be coated in a thin layer of grime, old dust, spilled drinks, forgotten food. It looked abandoned, and yet there was someone at the counter. Someone who hadn't seen a real person in ages. The attendant was tall, hunched over the counter with his hands pressed flat on the surface, as though he was trying to hide something beneath the desk. His face was hollow, eyes sunken so deeply. that it was impossible to tell where the shadows of his features ended. He didn't look at me when I approached. I should have turned around. I should have left. But my feet carried me forward, as though they had a mind of their own. "Need anything?" His voice was dry, raspy, like someone who hadn't spoken in decades. I looked down at the counter. There were only a few bottles of water, chips, and candy bars. But it was the glass jar in the corner that caught my attention. It was filled with dark liquid, a thick, syrupy substance that seemed to pulse in the dim light. I didn't ask about it. I didn't want to know. No. Just filling up. The attendant nodded, and without a word, he reached behind the counter and pulled out an old-fashioned rusted gas pump. His hands moved like they were used to the motions, but they were slow, deliberate. His fingers brushed against the nozzle with strange care. As he filled my tank, I stood there, frozen, staring at the bottle in the corner. The pulse of it. That rhythm. It was the same rhythm I'd heard in the truck, the rhythm of something breathing. I could feel it. It was getting closer. I glanced back at the door. There was no one standing outside, but the air had thickened. The shadows, they shifted, and then I heard it. A low, throaty growl. I didn't waste another second. I slammed the door, yanked the truck into gear, and floored the accelerator. The pump was still attached to the truck, swinging wildly in the wind, but I didn't care. The road stretched out in front of me, and I wasn't going to stop again. Not for anyone, not for anything. The growl grew louder, closer. And then I saw it in the rearview mirror. A figure. Tall, pale and hungry. I pushed the truck faster, but the figure didn't fade. It got closer. Closer, until it was right on my tail. I could feel the truck being tugged backward. The world around me was fading. The road behind me was pulling me into something far worse than anything I had ever seen. And then, just before everything went black, I saw it. The true face of the road, 1,000 faces, eyes, mouths, hands. They reached out to pull me under, to claim me, and in that final moment, I realized what this place was. It was nothing. The road. The truck. The endless stretch of asphalt. It was all a trap, a pit, a grave. I never should have driven down it. But now it's too late. The road owns me, and it always will. I don't know what happens when you reach the end of the road. I don't think anyone truly does. It's like a shadow that stretches forever, impossible to outrun. The moment you think you're free, it pulls you back in. But this road, this cursed stretch of highway, it has a way of trapping you, changing you, making you a part of it no matter how much you try to escape. The truck rumbled beneath me, but the engine wasn't the same anymore. It sounded hollow, distant, as if it were running on something much darker than fuel. The vibrations beneath my hands felt like they were coming from somewhere deep within the earth, as if the road itself was alive, breathing, waiting for me to make a mistake. I had made that mistake long ago. I should have never stopped. Should have never let the truck pull me in. Now there's no way out. The highway stretched before me, but the darkness seemed to have swallowed it whole. The headlights barely cut through the blackness. The road was a vast, yawning abyss, and every time I blinked, the scenery shifted ever so slightly. The trees were thicker now, leaning over the road like skeletal arms, reaching down to grab me. Their branches twisted into grotesque shapes, stretching across the sky, blocking out the stars. I could feel their eyes on me, though I couldn't see them. I could feel them in my skin, my bones. And then there was a sound, not a noise, a feeling, a pressure. It wasn't from the truck. It wasn't from anything physical. It was something else. A presence. Something close. Something wrong. I looked in. The rearview mirror again, but the road behind me was empty. No lights, no figures, just the endless dark. But the air felt heavier, like something was closing in on me. Something hungry. I gripped the wheel tighter. The engine sputtered like it was trying to tell me something. There was a weird low hum now, resonating through the entire vehicle, as if the truck was picking up signals that it shouldn't have been able to hear. And that's when I saw it. Up ahead, just around the bend, there was a flicker of light. The kind of light that doesn't belong out here. The kind that feels like it's bleeding into the world from somewhere else. I should have kept driving. I should have kept my eyes forward and ignored it, but the road, this cursed road, had already decided for me. The truck slowed down of its own accord, coasting toward the light like it was magnetized. The wheel turned itself, forcing me off. The main stretch of road and onto a narrow side path. The pavement here was different. It wasn't cracked and broken like the highway. It was smooth, too smooth. It almost shimmered under the truck's tires, reflecting the light in ways that didn't make sense. It wasn't the road anymore. It was something else entirely. I didn't want to stop. I didn't want to go any further. But I didn't have a choice. The truck was taking me. It was guiding me, pulling me forward. The road had already made that decision for me. The moment I stepped on it, it had claimed me, and now it wouldn't let go. The lights grew brighter as I approached the source. The shapes around me were too dark, too alive to make sense of. But one thing was clear. There was a building ahead, a structure of sorts. It rose from the ground, twisted and sickly, like some kind of ancient monument that had been half swallowed by the earth itself. The truck groaned beneath me, the engine choking, but it didn't stop. I couldn't stop. There was no way to turn around, no way to escape. Every part of me screamed to get out, to run, but my feet were frozen to the pedals. My eyes glued to the path ahead. I pulled into the driveway of the building. The lights blinked once more, flickering like they were trying to send me a message, but the message was garbled, distorted. The windows of the building were dark, empty, and yet I felt eyes watching me. It was a small structure, almost like a house, but it was far from ordinary. The walls were crooked, the roof sagging as though the building had been abandoned for centuries. There was a door, but it was ajar, swinging slowly in the wind. I stopped the truck. The air felt thick, suffocating. The dark seemed to pulse with an unseen rhythm, a heartbeat that didn't belong to any living thing. I knew I should have driven off, but I couldn't move. I couldn't think straight anymore. The truck had become a part of me, the road too. And now, this place, this thing, it was pulling me in. I could feel it in the marrow of my bones. The door to the building creaked open, and something stepped out. It wasn't a person, it wasn't even close. It was something else entirely. Tall, too thin. A shadow draped in rags, a silhouette barely visible against the flickering lights. Its face, if it could even be called a face, was obscured by a tattered cloth, but I could see the shape of something beneath it. The eyes. I didn't see them, not at first, but I felt them. I don't know how long I stared at it, but when it took a step toward me, I felt my breath stop in my chest. I didn't think. I didn't have time to think. I slammed the truck into reverse and floored the gas pedal. The wheels screeched, rubber burning against the road as I backed up, tearing away from the building, from the creature. But I didn't get far. The headlights flickered, and the world went dark for a moment. The hum returned, stronger now, vibrating through the air like a pulse. The truck sputtered, choked, and died. I stared at the dashboard in disbelief. The engine wasn't turning over. The lights were gone. Nothing. The road had swallowed me whole. The sound of footsteps reached me from behind. Slow, steady, relentless. I didn't want to turn around. I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to know what was coming for me. But the footsteps didn't stop. They were getting closer, dragging on. The earth like something heavy was coming for me. I knew the rules, never stop, never look back, but the darkness, it was too much. The shadows around me were alive, shifting and curling like smoke. The road itself was shifting, turning into something darker, something deeper, and then I heard it. The voice. It was faint at first, barely more than a whisper, but it grew louder with every passing second. You should have stayed on the road. The words vibrated in the air, wrapping themselves around my chest like chains, pulling me toward the voice. It was calling me. I could feel it. The end was near. The road had finally caught up with me. I turned around, and I saw the figure. It was standing right there, a few feet away from the truck, its limbs too long, its face still covered in that ragged cloth, and I knew then that there was no escape. The road had claimed me, and now I was part of it. The truck flickered back to life, the engine roaring to life in a sudden burst of power. But it wasn't my doing. It wasn't me driving anymore. The truck turned by itself, driving forward again, back onto the road, and I knew I was lost, forever. The truck rumbled forward once again, and I could feel the vibrations seeping deep into my bones. The world around me seemed to collapse in on itself, the dark stretching endlessly into an abyss where nothing could escape. Every turn, every bump in the road felt deliberate, like the truck or the road was pushing me towards some inevitable fate. I didn't know how long I'd been driving, but it didn't matter. Time didn't work the same out here. It had no meaning. Minutes, hours, maybe even days could have passed without me even realizing it. The road never changed. The trees, the signs, the dim lights, they all seemed to blur into one single unending stretch of nothingness. The silence was suffocating. I could barely hear the truck's engine anymore, only the slow, heavy thrum of the tires against the road. I looked out the window. There was nothing but blackness ahead. The occasional flicker of light from the truck's headlights illuminated the road just enough for me to see that it was still the same. Same cracks, same faded lines, same eerie feeling creeping down my spine, but there was something new this time. Something worse. The air was different. It was thicker, heavier. It felt like a weight pressing against my chest, making every breath feel like it was too much. The shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally long, creeping in from the edges of my vision, as if they were alive, waiting, watching. Their presence was oppressive, filling the space with a sense of impending doom. Then I saw something in the distance. Small flickering light, like a lantern, barely visible against the darkness. It wasn't the normal glow of a gas station or a rest stop. It was different, more unsettling. It pulsed, flickering in irregular intervals. It was as though it was calling me, drawing me in, telling me I had to go closer. My foot twitched on the accelerator, but I didn't want to go toward it. Something in my gut told me that it was a mistake, a trap set for me to fall into, but I couldn't ignore it. I had no choice. The truck turned by itself, guiding me toward the light, as if the road itself had taken control. As I drew closer, the light grew clearer. It wasn't coming from any visible source. There was no lamp or light post. It was simply there, suspended in the air, glowing with an unnatural intensity. It flickered, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the road, and then the truck slowed as if it too was hesitant to approach. The engine sputtered once, and I felt the air grow colder. The temperature had dropped significantly, the chill creeping through the cabin, making my skin break out in goosebumps. I slammed my hand against the wheel, trying to get some sense of control, but the road was no longer mine. The truck was pulling me closer, inch by inch, like I was being drawn into a predator's den. And then it happened. A figure appeared in the flickering light ahead. At first it was nothing but a shadow, just an outline of something humanoid. But as I neared, it became clearer. It was a person, or at least it looked like one. The figure was tall, wearing a long coat that seemed to ripple with the wind, though there was no breeze. The coat was tattered, worn at the edges, and the man's face was hidden by a wide-brimmed hat. I couldn't see his eyes, but I could feel them on me. I could feel them burning into my skin, as if he was looking straight through me. The moment I locked eyes with him, the world around me seemed to warp. The truck felt as though it was sinking into the road, and I felt a strange pressure build in my chest. He didn't move. He didn't speak. But I could feel his presence. It was a pressure, suffocating, like the air had thickened so much that I couldn't breathe anymore. And then slowly, deliberately, the man raised his hand. It wasn't a casual gesture. It was slow, almost agonizingly so, as if he was taking his time to make sure I noticed. His fingers stretched, long and thin, each one ending in sharp, claw-like nails. His hand hovered in the air for what felt like an eternity, but I couldn't look away. I couldn't move. I couldn't even blink. Then, in a voice that sounded like... It was coming from the ground itself, he spoke. "You shouldn't have stopped," he said, his voice low and gravelly, like it was coming from deep underground. "You shouldn't have come this far." It was the same voice I had heard before in my dreams, in the whispers of the night, the one that had been haunting me since the moment I entered this cursed stretch of highway. His words hit me like a physical blow. I could feel the weight of them pressing down on me, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. I could feel the truck vibrating beneath me, the engine sputtering once more. as if it too was struggling against whatever force had taken hold of us. Then, the figure stepped forward. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. I wanted to wheel to the side and flee, but the truck wouldn't budge. I was frozen, locked in place, held captive by something far worse than any physical restraint. The man took another step forward, and I saw his face. It wasn't human. It wasn't anything close. His face was a void, a dark, empty space where features should have been. No eyes, no mouth, just darkness. The same blackness that had swallowed the road, the truck, everything. I didn't understand what I was seeing. I couldn't comprehend it, but the moment I looked at it, I felt the pull, the draw, the influence of the road, of this thing. It was like it was calling me, begging me to join it in that black abyss. It wasn't just a man. It was something ancient, something that had been here long before the road, long before the trucks. It was a part of this place, this cursed highway, and it wanted me. Before I could react, the figure's hand shot out, faster than I could process. It wrapped around the edge of the truck's door, its claws scraping against the metal, sending a screech through the air that made my teeth rattle. Then, in an instant, it was gone. The figure vanished, as if it had never been there at all, and the world around me returned to normal. The truck was still idling in the middle of the road. The light flickered out, leaving me in complete darkness, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching me. I could feel it in my bones, the weight of its gaze pressing against me. I could hear it, too. A faint, rhythmic tapping, like nails against the truck's roof. The road stretched on, and so did the darkness. The presence remained. I couldn't explain it. I couldn't rationalize it. But I knew deep down that the only way out of this was to keep moving. The truck revved, but this time it was different. The engine growled, a low, deep sound that was more animal than machine. It was as though the truck itself had become aware of the danger I was in. But it wasn't helping. No one would help me now. The air was suffocating, thicker than before. The road curved ahead, winding into an even darker section of forest. The trees loomed like sentinels, their branches clawing at the sky, as if trying to keep me from going any further. But I had no choice. I couldn't stop. Not here. And then I saw it again, another flicker of light. This time it wasn't ahead. It was behind me. I glanced in the rearview mirror, but the reflection didn't match the reality of the road. The trees that should have been there were gone, replaced by something darker, something wrong. The mirror showed a tunnel, a narrow, winding passage made of stone, as though the road had opened up into some forgotten cavern. I wanted to look away. I wanted to ignore it. But I couldn't. I couldn't stop myself. The tunnel was closing in on me, and I knew then that I was never getting out. I couldn't look away. I should have. I knew that. But I couldn't tear my eyes from the rearview mirror. The tunnel, the dark passageway stretching behind me, was swallowing the world whole. The road had changed again. It wasn't a road anymore. It was a path that led somewhere deep inside the earth, somewhere I wasn't meant to go. The truck lurched forward on its own accord, pulling me toward the entrance of the tunnel. My hands were glued to the wheel, but my mind was reeling. I tried to breathe, but the air was heavy, dense. I felt like I was sinking deeper with every breath, the weight of whatever was happening pressing harder against my chest. The tunnel grew larger in the mirror, its jagged stone walls shimmering with an unnatural glow. A faint greenish light seeped, from cracks in the walls pulsing like a heartbeat. The shadows seemed to flicker and twist, alive with a malevolent energy, as if they were waiting for something to emerge from within. I couldn't stop the truck. It was like a freight train, and I was helpless in its wake. The engine roared almost like it was screaming, and I could feel the vibrations running up through the wheel and into my arms. The world outside was fading, becoming a blur of darkness and light. The road behind me had disappeared, replaced entirely by the tunnel. There was no going back now. I could hear the hum again, that strange, low frequency that seemed to reverberate through the truck. I could feel it in my bones, in my teeth, in my soul. The road had taken me completely. There was no escape. I tried to look ahead, but there was nothing to see. The headlights barely lit the way. The tunnel stretched on forever, a dark, endless void that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. It felt alive. The walls seemed to breathe in time with the truck's engine, the shadows dancing just out of reach of the light. And then a noise. At first it was a whisper, a faint rustling sound coming from the back of the truck. It was too quiet to make out at first, but then it grew louder. A scratching sound as though something was moving inside the cab. I turned my head, but I couldn't see anything in the rearview mirror. The interior of the truck was just as dark as the world outside. The scratching continued, and then I heard a thump. I whipped my head around, my heart pounding in my chest. There was something in the truck with me, but there was no time to react. The tunnel had changed again. The walls were narrowing, closing in, as though the very earth was trying to trap me inside. The truck's engine sputtered, as if it too were trying to escape, but there was no way out. The tunnel had become its own prison, its own maze, and I was just another victim caught in its grip. The scratching grew louder. It was coming from behind me, from the cargo hold. I didn't know what was there. I didn't want to know. But the noise was unmistakable. Something was alive in the back of the truck. I reached for the door handle, my fingers trembling. My mind screamed at me to stop, but I couldn't control my body anymore. I was no longer in control of the truck, the road, or even myself. With a violent jerk, the truck lurched again, almost sending me into the steering wheel. My breath caught in my throat. The engine was dying. The lights flickered. It was almost like the truck itself was fading. And then the scratching stopped, a silence so thick it could have smothered me. I glanced nervously in the rearview mirror once again, and I saw something. It wasn't there before, at least not the way it was now. A figure, pale and gaunt, was standing in the middle of the road. It was barely visible, barely even there. The pale shape flickered in and out of view like a malfunctioning light, but it was real. Its long, spindly limbs swayed in a motion that made my stomach turn. It didn't move like a person. It moved like it was made of something that wasn't flesh, something that wasn't human. My hands trembled as I gripped the steering wheel, trying to get control, but the truck wasn't responding. The figure grew closer, flickering faster now, its form becoming clearer. It was wrong in a way I couldn't describe. It was barely even a body, a series of twisting shadows and distorted shapes that merged together into something terrifying. I could see its eyes now. They weren't eyes at all. They were hollow, black pits, swirling with something dark and ancient. They pulled me in. I felt my body go cold, as though the very life was being drained from me. My heartbeat accelerated, each beat growing louder in my ears. I could hear it, hear the sound of my blood rushing in my veins. The figure wasn't walking anymore. It was floating, hovering just above the ground, its form trembling like it was trying to keep its shape together. And then it spoke. Its voice was unlike anything I'd ever heard. It wasn't a voice, it was a vibration. It was a sound that went straight to my bones, something that echoed in the very fabric of my being. Come closer, and you will understand. The words felt like a command, like the earth itself was telling me what to do. I felt the truck jerk again, like it was ready to follow the figure's instructions. I could feel the wheel turning in my hands, pulling me closer to that thing, closer to whatever hell was waiting for me. I slammed my foot on the brake, but it didn't matter. The truck wouldn't stop. The tunnel stretched further ahead, and the figure was moving faster now. It was at the front of the truck, its shadow falling across the windshield, blocking my view. Its voice vibrated through the air, getting louder, like it was inside my head, telling me exactly what it wanted. You can't escape, it whispered. This road, this place, it owns you now. I could feel the walls of the tunnel closing in, the space getting tighter, more suffocating. My vision blurred. I felt dizzy, my head spinning. The lights flickered once more, and I realized this was it. I was trapped. There was no way out, no way to escape. The figure's form was right in front of the windshield now. It was so close I could almost touch it, but I knew better. It was no longer a thing of flesh. It was something ancient, something older than time. Its eyes, those dark pits, stared into mine with an intensity that made my skin crawl. Its mouth opened slowly, impossibly wide. "You have arrived," it said, its voice now a roar in my ears, and then it screamed. The truck slammed into something I couldn't see. The force of it sent my body jerking forward, and the world turned black. The sound of the crash rang in my ears, and for a moment everything was still. But then the feeling returned, that weight, that pressure. It was in the truck. It was inside, me inside everything. The road was never going to let me go, not now, not ever. I opened my eyes to darkness. Complete, unrelenting darkness. I couldn't see anything, not even my hand in front of my face. My breath came in short, ragged gasps as I fought to collect my bearings. The truck was still moving, barely, but it was still moving. I tried to move, but something was holding me in place. My body felt heavy, as if I were sinking into the seat, into the truck itself. The air felt colder now, colder than it ever had. I could feel it pressing down on me, smothering me, making it harder and harder to breathe. It was as if the very air in the truck had turned to ice, every breath a struggle, each exhale coming out in a cloud of mist. The truck jolted again, more violently this time. My head slammed into the steering wheel, and for a moment, everything went white. Pain shot through my skull like a lightning bolt. I gripped the wheel to steady myself, but the motion wasn't right. The truck's wheels weren't turning on the road. No, they were sliding, scraping against something rough, something hard, something that felt unnatural. I tried to look around, but the darkness seemed to stretch farther than before, enveloping me, suffocating me. I couldn't tell where the road ended and where the tunnel began. The boundary between the two was blurring, fading into nothingness. The truck kept sliding, groaning under the strain, as if it were fighting against the pull of something much larger than itself. I tried to focus, to clear my mind, but I couldn't shake the sense that something was wrong. No, more than wrong. That something was in the truck with me. Something that wasn't part of this world. I felt a coldness brush against my neck, like a thin, icy finger trailing along my skin. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. My heart skipped a beat. I froze, barely daring to breathe. That cold sensation spread down my spine, turning into an icy chill that numbed my body, as if my blood itself had turned to ice. It felt like something was crawling inside me, something foreign, invasive, pushing its way into my very being. I gasped, pulling my hands away from the steering wheel. I could feel my heartbeat hammering in my chest, each pulse echoing in my ears like a drum. I turned my head slowly, inch by inch, my eyes darting across the cabin. Nothing. No sign of any strange presence, no shadow moving in the corner. Just darkness pressing in from all sides. But then I saw it, the figure. It was standing in the corner of the truck's cabin. At first I thought it was a trick of the light, a trick of the darkness. But no, it was real. It was there. It was the same figure from before, the one with the hollow black eyes, the one that had whispered to me, calling me toward the unknown. Its face, or what passed for a face, was barely there. How shifting mass of darkness, its features constantly changing, warping, never settling on anything solid. But I could feel it. I could feel its gaze, its eyes, those dark, endless pits, were locked on me, piercing through the shadows, through the walls of the truck, right into my soul. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flee. But I was paralyzed. My body wouldn't respond. It was like the figure was controlling me, keeping me rooted in place, unable to do anything but watch. It stepped forward, its movements fluid and unnerving, like it was gliding through the air, defying the laws of reality. Each step it took seemed to distort the very space around it. The air around it shimmered, bending like a mirage, rippling with energy. Closer, closer. The figure came toward me, its presence pressing in on me from all sides, pushing the air out of my lungs. I wanted to turn away, to close my eyes, to pretend it wasn't happening. But I couldn't, and then it spoke. But this time it wasn't a voice. It was a feeling, a sensation that resonated deep inside me, like a vibration that shook me to my core. It was like the voice of the earth itself, the voice of the highway, of the road. It wasn't a sound, it was knowing, the knowledge of everything. "You are lost," it said. "You have crossed the point of no return." The words slid into my mind, making everything else fade into the background. There was nothing now but its voice, filling every corner of my being. My heart raced. I was drowning in its presence. It was inside my head now, controlling my thoughts, controlling my actions. The truck was no longer mine. It was an extension of whatever this thing was, this force that had taken over the road. I could feel the walls of the truck beginning to cave in. The metal groaned under pressure. The very air seemed to be alive, writhing around me, as if the truck itself was a living entity, pulling me deeper into whatever nightmare this had become. I tried to move again, to break free, but my body wouldn't obey. My fingers remained frozen to the wheel. The truck's wheels screeched, scraping against the road, but the road wasn't the same anymore. It wasn't asphalt, it was something else, something alive, something that could feel, and it was pulling me under. The figure loomed closer, its form now a solid shape, a black silhouette against the faint flickering light that surrounded it. I could feel it reaching out to me, its invisible tendrils winding around my mind, wrapping themselves around my consciousness. "You cannot escape," it whispered. "This road never ends. It goes on forever through the cracks of reality itself." The walls of the truck were no longer solid. They were warping, twisting, bending inward. I could see the space inside the truck, expanding, stretching out like a cavern, an endless void that threatened to swallow me whole. The headlights flickered again, casting an eerie glow on the distorted road ahead. And then I saw it. A figure, more like a shadow, darted across the road. It was moving so quickly, so erratically, that it didn't look human. It was as if it were a part of the road itself, a shape formed by the very darkness that surrounded us. I felt my body stiffen. The truck's engine revved, but the wheels couldn't grip. It was as if the road itself had turned into a pit of tar, pulling the truck down into the depths. "Stop! Stop! Stop!" I was screaming inside my head, but nothing happened. The figure was almost upon us. It had materialized in front of the truck, its shape solidifying as it stepped into the beams of the headlights. It wasn't human. It wasn't anything that could be described in words. Its eyes were open, hollow pits, black as the void. But this time they weren't just watching me. They were calling me. The figure reached out a hand, long and skeletal, its fingers extending, curling toward me. The truck shuddered beneath me, its engine screaming as it was pulled into the figure's grasp, and then everything went dark. I don't know how much time passed after the lights went out. I was completely blind, my senses overwhelmed with the sense of falling or being pulled into some great abyss. The air was cold, so cold it felt like it was crawling inside my skin, reaching into my bones. The truck was still moving, though I couldn't tell if I was driving it or if it was being driven by something else entirely. The rumbling of the engine vibrated through my entire body, a constant reminder that this nightmare was real. It wasn't a dream. I could feel the truck swaying, the tires scraping against something soft, something strange. The road was no longer solid beneath me. It felt like I was gliding, floating over an uneven surface, as though gravity itself had been warped. The heavy darkness surrounding me pressed in like 1,000 unseen hands, clutching at my throat, suffocating me, preventing me from escaping. I tried to focus, I tried to regain control. My hands gripped the steering wheel harder, my knuckles aching from the strain. I forced my eyes open, but there was nothing to see. The darkness was total, all-consuming. The headlights were dead, the dashboard lights dim, and even the radio was silent, nothing but static where there used to be music. I forced myself to take deep, controlled breaths, but it didn't help. The cold, suffocating air didn't give way to relief. It only pressed harder, squeezing my lungs, making each breath feel more labored than the last. It was as if the very air itself was filled with something else, something that didn't belong in this world. The truck shuddered again, a violent jolt that sent me tumbling forward, nearly slamming my head against the steering wheel. I jerked, upright, my pulse pounding in my ears, the echoes of the crash still ringing through the cabin. I reached for the gear shift, trying to stop the truck, but there was no point. The truck wasn't obeying me anymore. The engine roared again, louder this time. It was like it had come to life on its own. The truck accelerated faster and faster, and yet the road beneath us seemed to stretch longer, endless. I had no idea where I was going. The tunnel, the road, the highway, it all felt like a twisted dream now. Everything was spinning, blurring together. I couldn't keep track of anything. And then I heard it. That soft scraping sound again. It was behind me, just out of reach. I could feel it though, like something was shifting in the back of the truck. I couldn't explain it, but it felt wrong. It felt like whatever was in there, whatever had been hidden in the cargo hold, was moving. I turned my head slowly, my eyes wide with dread, praying I wouldn't see what I feared. But I couldn't help it. I had to look. I felt my heart drop into my stomach as the shadows in the back of the truck seemed to grow, to take shape. Something was there, something huge, something alive. It shifted, groaned, as if it were trying to break free from the confines of the cargo hold. The shadows were twisting now, undulating, pulsing with an unnatural energy. I couldn't see it clearly, but I could feel it. The presence was unmistakable. It was wrong. Whatever was back there was wrong. The truck creaked under the weight of it, the metal groaning as though the walls themselves were being bent and reshaped. I screamed. My voice cracked, desperate, but it was drowned out by the deafening roar of the engine and the horrific sound. Coming from the back of the truck, I had to do something. I had to stop it. But how I slammed my foot on the brakes, but the truck didn't slow down. If anything, it sped up. The engine howled in protest, rattling the entire cabin. It was like the truck was fighting me, resisting everything I tried to do. And then the door to the cargo hold burst open. I don't know how. I didn't see it happen. One moment, the door was closed. The next, it was wide open, flapping violently in the wind as the truck hurtled forward. The shadows inside the back of the truck were now fully visible, swirling and writhing like living things. I could hear voices, low, murmuring voices, chanting in a language I couldn't understand. It was like they were calling to me. They were beckoning me. I couldn't look away. A figure appeared in the doorway. It was hunched over, its body twisted in unnatural ways. The figure's face was hidden in shadow, but its eyes, those eyes, were glowing. The same hollow black pits that had appeared in the figure from before. The figure stepped into the cabin, its limbs contorting as it moved, its form so twisted and inhuman that I couldn't even comprehend what I was seeing. It moved toward me with a speed that made my heart race. It didn't walk. It glided, like it was floating just above the ground. Its long, bony fingers reached for me, and I could feel the temperature in the truck drop even further, as if its very presence was leaching the warmth from the air. I froze. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I heard it speak, its voice a low, guttural growl that made my skin crawl. "You've come too far to turn back now." The words weren't just spoken. They echoed inside my head, reverberating in my skull, like the ringing of a bell. I could feel its fingers brushing against my face, cold as death. My body trembled uncontrollably. My mind screaming at me to escape, to run, to get away. But I was paralyzed, trapped, caught in the grip of whatever this thing was. It leaned closer, its face inches from mine. I could smell it, an odor like rotting flesh mixed with sulfur, a stench so foul it made me want to gag, and then it whispered in my ear, "You're part of it now." The air seemed to grow thicker, heavier, and I could feel something shift inside me. A presence, a foreign sensation, creeping into my mind, altering me, changing me. And then the truck lurched again, throwing me forward. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer in control. The truck was moving on its own, but we weren't on the highway anymore. We weren't even on a road. We were in somewhere else. The space around me was dark. No, it wasn't just dark. It was empty. There were no roads, no tunnels, no signs. Just a vast, endless expanse of nothingness. No stars, no sky, no ground. Just an endless void. The truck kept moving, its wheels grinding against something I couldn't see, something that didn't make sense. The air was thick with an oppressive silence, broken only by the faint hum of the engine, and then I saw them. Figures. Shapes. Shadowy beings drifting in the void. I couldn't see them clearly, but I could feel their presence, their eyes on me. I could feel them watching me. The figure was beside me again. It had never left. It leaned over the seat, its breath, if you could even call it that, cold and foul against my ear. I could feel its weight pressing down on me, its presence consuming me, filling my chest with a crushing pressure, and it whispered again. Its voice like a whisper of wind, but so sharp, so chilling. This is where it ends. This is where it all begins. The truck moved on deeper into the void, and I had no choice but to follow. The truck continued to drift, the wheels no longer rolling on a physical road, but instead on something that could only be described as wrong. I couldn't understand what was beneath us, and I didn't want to know. The only thing I could focus on was the fact that the truck was moving without any guidance from me. The wheel turned slightly on its own, the engine revving and shuddering with an unnatural rhythm. My hands clutched at the seat, but they felt useless, as though my very presence in this space had no impact. I wasn't driving this truck anymore. The truck itself, along with everything else, was part of something much bigger, something that I was too small to comprehend. I could feel the oppressive weight of the void around me pressing in closer, like a blanket made of darkness. It felt alive, as if it were aware of my every movement, my every breath. It was suffocating, but I had no choice but to breathe in this stale, frigid air. There was nothing else to do but ride this unholy journey and face whatever waited at the end, or in the case of this place, the lack of an end. Then, something changed. I didn't notice it at first, but a faint hum began to vibrate in the air. It was subtle at first, like the hum of a distant machine, but as time dragged on it grew louder, the pitch rising, until it filled the truck cabin, vibrating through my chest, rattling my teeth. I strained my ears, trying to locate the source of the sound. It wasn't coming from the truck. It wasn't coming from anything inside the cabin. No, this hum, it was coming from somewhere else, somewhere beyond the truck, somewhere in this void. I couldn't see it. I couldn't touch it, but I could feel it. The air shimmered with this noise, like the low reverberations of something massive and unseen, something ancient. It was a hum that spoke to my very soul, as if the very universe itself was trying to communicate with me. And then, just as abruptly as it had begun, the hum stopped. Everything fell silent. The silence was worse, much worse. It felt like the kind of silence that weighs down on you, presses against your chest like a physical force, slowly suffocating you, making it harder and harder to breathe. But I had to keep breathing. I had no choice. I couldn't stop. If I stopped, I would, fade into this darkness forever. I gripped the wheel again, the cold metal of it digging into my palms. I was still trying to regain control of the truck, trying to make sense of everything, but the reality of my situation was sinking in with terrifying clarity. There was no road, no direction, just an endless void, a chasm that stretched out in all directions. There was no beginning, no end. I was trapped in this space. The truck was moving, where I didn't know, but it was moving, and I had no idea how to stop it. I didn't even know if it could stop. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw something shift. A shadow flickered. It wasn't there one moment, but then it was. A figure standing just beyond the edge of my sight. It was just a glimpse at first, and I thought maybe I was imagining things. Maybe it was just the darkness playing tricks on me. But then the figure stepped forward slowly, deliberately. It was tall, its form distorted by the shadows, like something trying to take shape, but failing. The air around it shimmered, distorted by its very presence. I couldn't see its face, just a blank dark mass where its features should have been, and it was coming closer. My heart started pounding in my chest, and the breath I'd been holding escaped in a shudder. I couldn't look away. I couldn't tear my eyes from it. It was as if my body had been frozen in place, every instinct screaming at me to run. But my legs wouldn't move, my hands remained fixed to the wheel, and my eyes remained locked on the figure. It reached out with long, thin arms, its fingers curling into claws sharp as knives. I could see them now, those black, empty eyes, just two pits of darkness. The figure didn't need to speak to make its intentions clear. It was here. It had always been here. A voice, faint and hoarse, scratched at my mind. It wasn't spoken aloud, but it was in my head, loud and clear. You've been chosen. I could feel the words. They resonated in my skull, reverberating, filling every inch of space around me. It wasn't just a sentence. It was a command, an order, a truth. And I knew deep down that it wasn't just the truck I was trapped in. I was trapped in this place, this endless dark void. I didn't know where it had come from. I didn't know how it existed. But I was part of it now. And it would never let me go. I tried to scream, I tried to move, but the truck wouldn't respond. It felt like the world itself was pushing back, not letting me escape, not letting me even move a finger. My mind raced, my pulse quickening as the figure drew nearer. I looked away for a fraction of a second, and when I turned back, it was right there, right in front of me, looming over me like a black cloud of terror. Its presence was suffocating, its shape now fully formed, an outline of dark, writhing smoke. I could feel it, pressing down on me, creeping into my thoughts, stealing my breath. I could feel its eyes burning into me, though I couldn't see them clearly. There was no face, no recognizable feature, except that suffocating sense of being. Watched. It was as if it knew everything about me. Everything I had done, every mistake, every regret, every moment of fear. It had seen all of it, and now it was waiting. You are the driver, the voice inside my head whispered. The one who moves between the worlds. But there is no turning back now. It stepped closer, its presence engulfing the truck's cabin. I could feel it in my chest, pushing me backward into the seat, smothering me, drowning me in its unholy presence. And then it spoke again. It's too late to run. The road ends where you are now, and now you belong to it. The figure raised its hand, and I felt the truck lurch, as if something far more powerful than I could comprehend was taking hold of the vehicle, pulling it into its grip. I felt the temperature plummet. Ice ran through my veins. My breath came, in shallow gasps, my heart beating faster with every passing second. Suddenly the truck jerked violently, throwing me against the seatbelt, almost knocking the air from my lungs. The cabin seemed to stretch, the walls pulling outward as though the truck itself was distorting, warping into a larger, more cavernous space. I could feel the vastness, the emptiness around me expanding. The truck no longer felt like a truck. It was something more, something ancient, something alive. And then, just as quickly, everything stopped. The truck was still. The darkness faded. The figures were gone. But I wasn't alone anymore. The stillness was unbearable. It pressed down on me like a weight, cold and suffocating. For a brief moment I thought maybe I was alone again. Maybe the figure, the truck, the endless highway were all just nightmares. But deep inside, I knew that wasn't true. I knew that this wasn't over. I forced myself to look around the cabin, trying to shake off the numbness that had crept into my limbs. My hands were still gripping the steering wheel, my knuckles white with tension. The engine was quiet now, its previously furious roar reduced to a low hum, barely audible. The lights on the dashboard flickered, but there was still nothing outside. The windows except the endless black. It was as if we were suspended in some vast empty space. No stars, no landmarks, no horizon, just nothingness. I could feel something moving, something shifting in the air around me. It wasn't visible, but it was there, pressing at the edges of my awareness. It was watching, waiting. I wanted to scream, but the words stuck in my throat. It felt like the very act of screaming would break the fragile silence, that I'd awakened something I wasn't prepared to face. So I held it in, my fear growing with every passing second. I couldn't stay here. I had to do something. I had to get out of this truck, out of this place. But as I shifted in my seat, my body suddenly felt heavy, as though I were fighting against the very air itself. I forced myself to reach for the door handle, but it wouldn't move. I yanked it again. Then a third time until I realized there was no handle. It was just solid, unyielding metal. No way out. I looked down at the dashboard. There was nothing that should have been there. No signs, no lights, no controls. The truck had turned into a monstrous thing, an unknown machine that refused to follow any laws of physics, reality, or logic. I was trapped in this cabin, trapped in this reality. Then slowly I noticed something else, a faint glow at the edges of my vision, a flickering light, not from the dashboard, but from the far end of the truck's rearview mirror. It was barely there at first, but it grew stronger, more intense, as if it were calling me. I didn't want to look, I didn't want to see whatever was behind me. But the pull was undeniable. Something in my chest clenched, and my neck turned, on its own, forcing me to face the mirror. What I saw made my heart stop. There was a face staring back at me, but it wasn't mine. It was pale, nearly translucent, its features sharp and gaunt. Its eyes were wide, hollow, black pits that seemed to suck in all the light. Its skin was stretched thin, the bones beneath visible as if the flesh had been peeled back in some gruesome fashion. Its mouth hung open slightly as though it were about to speak, but no sound came. I could see its lips twitch though, and a flicker of movement, like it was trying to form words. The figure's hands were pressed against the inside of the glass, its fingers stretching as if trying to reach through. And then it began to move. I recoiled in horror, my heart pounding in my chest. The face, no, the thing was shifting, becoming more defined, as though it were pulling itself from the mirror, stretching itself into the space between us. It was moving in ways that didn't make sense, twisting and distorting, pulling itself free of the confines of the glass. I slammed my foot on the brakes, even though I knew it wouldn't do anything. The truck lurched forward, but the creature in the mirror stayed in place. It was coming closer. The truck sped down an invisible highway, moving faster and faster, as if it were trying to escape the thing that was now on the other side of the mirror. But I knew it wouldn't help. Nothing would help. And then the face spoke. "You cannot run." It was a voice, low, guttural, and filled with a mocking tone that sent chills down my spine. It echoed in my head, reverberating through my skull, vibrating in my chest. "You belong to us now, all of you." I closed my eyes tightly, trying to block out the sound, but it didn't help. The words kept coming, over and over, each one drilling deeper into my mind, sinking into my consciousness like a parasite. It was impossible to escape. I reached for the rearview mirror, trembling hands pulling at the edges, desperate to tear it off, but it wouldn't budge. The mirror felt like it was a part of the truck now, part of the nightmare I was trapped in. As I pulled harder, the image in the mirror grew clearer, more detailed. The thing's face was now directly in front of me, its eyes staring into mine, unblinking, unrelenting. I couldn't look away. I couldn't escape it. It was inside my head, inside my thoughts, suffocating me from the inside out. I could feel it, its presence, starting to creep into my body, seeping through my skin, curling around my bones. I could feel its influence, its control taking root. "It's too late," the thing whispered. "There's no escape from us. We own you now, forever." The world around me began to warp again. The air grew heavier. The truck seemed to distort, twisting as though it were being pulled apart by unseen hands. The reality I knew began to shatter, breaking into pieces that scattered into the void. The darkness pressed in on all sides, and I could feel myself being drawn into it, pulled into the center of whatever twisted dimension this was. I struggled, tried to fight against it, but it was futile. My body felt like it was being pulled apart. My limbs stretched and distorted as the darkness began to consume me. I screamed, but no sound came out. I was trapped in this nightmare that had no end. The mirror shattered. Shards of glass exploded outward, splintering into 1,000 pieces that fell like rain around me. The creature's face disappeared, but the darkness didn't lift. It only grew stronger, more oppressive, filling every inch of the truck, crawling through the cracks, suffocating me. And then I felt it, the cold hand on my shoulder. I turned. Around and standing there in the darkness was another figure. It was like the others, but different. Its face was obscured, hidden by a shadow that seemed to move and shift on its own. It didn't speak, but it didn't need to. I could feel it. Its presence was an overwhelming weight, pressing down on my chest, suffocating me. The thing reached out, its hand slow and deliberate, as if it were savoring every moment of my terror. And then it touched me. The moment its hand made contact, everything stopped. The truck, the void, the presence of the creatures, it all froze. The world held its breath, and in that moment I understood. "You were never meant to leave," the thing said, its voice now filling my mind. And as the darkness consumed me, I realized that this was my fate. This was my purpose now, to drive and never stop. The cold hand still lingered on my shoulder, its touch as icy as death itself. I could feel it slowly spreading through my body, reaching into my chest, into my very soul. The pressure in the truck mounted, a palpable weight pressing down on me, suffocating me as the darkness deepened. Every breath I took felt like I was inhaling the very essence of the void. The air itself felt tainted, twisted, as if it had never known life. But the hand, its touch, was somehow familiar. Not in a comforting way, but in a way that felt like it had always been there, as if it had been waiting for me. The moment it made contact, everything froze. It was as if time itself had come to a standstill. The truck, which had been rattling, and shifting in ways that defied logic, was now completely still. The humming engine, the flickering lights on the dashboard, all of it stopped. The air grew dense, and the faintest whisper of someone breathing filled the silence. It felt like the whole universe was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. And then, it did. The truck began to move again, but it wasn't the same truck. It wasn't the vehicle I had been driving for years, the one I had spent countless hours behind the wheel of. This was something else entirely. The wheels beneath me hummed with an energy I couldn't comprehend, and the engine, though silent, seemed to roar with an untamable power. The darkness outside the windows began to shift, forming patterns that seemed to whisper secrets I couldn't understand. And there, in the periphery of my vision, the figure stood, the figure that had touched me, the one with no face. Its shadow loomed over me, filling the cabin with an overwhelming sense of dread. It didn't speak, but I could feel its presence pressing in, curling around me, suffocating every thought I tried to form. "You cannot escape," a voice echoed in my head. The voice was familiar but distant. "You never could." I wanted to scream, to push against it, but I couldn't. Every part of me felt trapped, unable to move or react. The more I struggled, the more the weight of the darkness grew. My mind felt like it was breaking apart, the edges fraying as this oppressive force seeped into every corner of my thoughts. It wasn't just the truck that had changed. It was me. I wasn't in control anymore. I wasn't driving this truck. It was driving me. The air grew colder. I could see my breath now, rising in misty clouds in front of me. The world outside was still nothing but a void, a chasm of nothingness stretching endlessly in every direction. There was no ground, no sky, just the endless blackness that swallowed everything whole. "Where are we going?" I managed to whisper, the words barely escaping my lips. The figure didn't answer. Instead, the truck lurched forward, as if pulled by some unseen force. I could feel the speed increasing, but it wasn't like before. It wasn't like the simple act of driving anymore. There was no road beneath me, no path to follow. The truck was being pulled through this endless void by something far more powerful than anything I could understand. The landscape around us began to warp. Shapes, distorted, unnatural, shifted in the periphery of my vision. The very air seemed to ripple, as if reality itself was bending, twisting under some unseen influence. I couldn't tell what was real anymore. Then there was a sound, a whisper, a low, almost imperceptible hiss, like wind rustling through dry leaves. But this wasn't the sound of wind. This was something far worse. It was a voice. Not a human voice. No, this voice was different. It was ancient, filled with malice, filled with the weight of eons of darkness. "You were never meant to drive this road," the voice whispered, curling around me like smoke. "You were never meant to find the end." The truck jerked again, and I saw something out of the corner of my eye, a flash of light, bright and blinding, like lightning cracking through the darkness. My heart skipped a beat. The figure, the one that had been watching me, the one that had touched me, was now standing directly in front of me. It hadn't moved, but somehow it was right there, standing across from me, its dark eyes, those pits of endless black, staring into mine. "Do you see?" it asked, the words almost a plea. But there was no humanity in its voice, just cold, endless hunger. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to acknowledge the darkness that loomed over me, threatening to swallow me whole. But I couldn't tear my eyes away. There was something compelling about it, something that made me feel as if I had no choice. I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened, and the air seemed to thicken, pressing in on me from all sides. The thing was inside my head now, its whispers like a cold wind curling around my thoughts. "How you have seen the truth," the voice said. "The road never ends, it never was meant to. And now you are part of it. You will drive forever, forever and beyond." My hands gripped the wheel, but it was no use. The wheel was a part of the truck, a part of this cursed machine, and I was nothing more than a passenger now. No longer a driver, no longer a man in control. I was merely a passenger on a journey that had no end. The truck lurched again, but this time it wasn't just the truck. It was me. I felt myself being pulled into it, into the truck, into the void that surrounded us. It was as if my very soul was being sucked into the machine, consumed by the darkness that had overtaken it. I couldn't stop it. I couldn't stop myself. And then, for the first time, I understood what it meant to be truly lost. "You are ours now," the voice echoed. "You will never leave. The road is your home. Forever." The darkness began to fade, not in the sense of light returning, but in the sense that I was becoming a part of it. I could feel the void wrapping around me, filling every corner of my being. My thoughts dissolved, like smoke in the wind. I was no longer aware of where I ended and the truck began. I was the truck. I was the road. I was the endless journey. The truck continued to drive, though I couldn't say where. The highway had no end. The darkness had no boundary. I wasn't sure if I was still alive or if I was something else entirely now, something in between, trapped between worlds, between time. The truck carried me forward, into the endless nothing. And I knew that no matter how much time passed, I would never escape. I was trapped in the cycle, the endless cycle, and I would never stop driving. The road stretched on endlessly before me, a ribbon of emptiness winding through the dark. It was as if the truck itself had become the road, and I had become part of the machine, fused with it in a way that transcended everything I had ever known. My body no longer felt like mine. No. It was like I was simply a passenger in my own form, an observer, trapped in a place where time didn't exist. I couldn't see the end. I couldn't see anything except the endless stretch of darkness, the soft hum of the engine, and the oppressive silence that hung around me like a fog. There was nothing to focus on but the road, the endless, looping highway that seemed to wind around itself in an eternal spiral. The blackness outside the truck's windows had no horizon, no reference points. It was as if I were driving through the very fabric of space itself, lost in the void. And yet, something shifted. Something changed. I couldn't tell what it was at first. At first there was just the quiet, unbroken and unyielding. But then, I began to notice a faint flickering in the periphery of my vision. A light. Barely perceptible at first, but it was there. Something that didn't belong in this void. It was faint, distant, like a tiny star at the edge of a vast, endless sky. It didn't make sense. The darkness was absolute. There couldn't be anything out there, but it was there. I saw it. The light blinked again, this time a little brighter, a little clearer. I could feel a pull, a strange compulsion to follow it. Something within me, some instinct that had been buried deep, urged me to drive towards it, to chase it. But something about that feeling was wrong. Everything about this journey was wrong. The truck was wrong. The road was wrong. I was wrong. I pressed my foot to the accelerator, though it felt like I was doing it out of habit, not out of conscious thought. The truck responded immediately, surging forward, as if it too was aware of the strange pull of the light. The distance between us closed, slowly at first, then faster as I urged the truck onward. My hands gripped the wheel, but I couldn't focus on anything other than that tiny flickering light in the distance. The hum of the engine seemed to grow louder, more insistent, filling the cabin with its strange vibration. The air in the truck became thick again, that same oppressive weight bearing down on me as the light grew stronger, more defined. It wasn't a star. It wasn't even a streetlight. It was a window in the darkness. The shape of it started to become clearer. A soft golden glow seeped from the edges of the frame, leaking into the blackness surrounding it, casting long, twisting shadows on the ground that seemed to move of their own accord. My heart began to race, and a cold shiver ran up my spine. The air was thick with the scent of something unfamiliar, something metallic, almost decayed. And then, for a brief second, I knew it. I knew what the window was. A door. Not a door that could be opened with a handle or a key, but a door that could only be crossed by the lost. A door that would open only when it sensed a soul like mine. The door was the escape, the end, the release from this endless nightmare. At least that's what I thought, but I should have known better. Nothing is ever truly what it seems in this place. As the truck neared the window, my mind screamed to stop. I felt something pulling at me, not like the previous presence that had latched onto me, but something deeper. This feeling was primal, instinctive, something ancient inside of me that knew what crossing that threshold would mean. But I couldn't stop. The truck didn't give me a choice. It was as if I were merely a passenger in my own body, watching, as my hands steered the wheel towards that glowing frame. The closer I got, the more the air shifted and the temperature dropped. I could see my breath now, rising in thick clouds before me. The light from the window flickered like it was struggling to stay alight, fighting against the darkness that sought to swallow it whole. It became clearer now, more tangible, a large rectangle of light against the nothingness. The edges of the window shimmered, and something inside, some part of my soul, ached to reach it. The truck raced forward. The engine roared as I neared the light. But as I did, the light began to pulse. First slowly, then faster, its rhythm matching the pulsing in my chest, my heart pounding in my ears. The glow turned sickly yellow, then bright red, and as I passed through the window's frame, the world shifted violently. The truck lurched, the entire machine shuddering as if it were alive. I felt a violent jolt rip through my body, the impact shaking me to the core. The walls of the truck seemed to bend, warping and distorting as I was pulled forward into the light. The world outside the window was no longer a void. I was somewhere else. The highway I had been driving on was gone. The darkness had disappeared, leaving me in a place that felt wrong. The road beneath me now stretched through what looked like a desolate, barren land, the ground cracked and dry, as if it had been abandoned for eons. There were no trees, no buildings, no signs of life. The air was thin, suffocating, and the sky above was a sickly shade of grey, like it was perpetually twilight. I could see nothing but emptiness, stretching far beyond the horizon. But that wasn't the most unsettling part. No, it was the sound. The truck had stopped moving. The engine fell silent, the rhythmic hum replaced by an eerie quiet. But in the distance, barely audible at first, I heard something. Footsteps, soft, slow, dragging along the cracked earth. As I looked around, I could see nothing, but the footsteps grew louder, closer, and then I saw it. A figure emerged from the mist. It was humanoid, but its movements were jerky, unnatural, as if it was a puppet being pulled by invisible strings. The figure was tall enough that I could barely make out its face beneath the tattered cloak that billowed around its form. The cloak was black as midnight, swallowing any light that came near it. The creature's feet dragged across the ground, leaving deep, wet marks behind it as it advanced. It stopped when it reached the edge of the truck, its head tilting slightly as it looked up at me. For the first time, the truck felt real again. The figure's face was gaunt, hollow, and pale, but it wasn't what scared me most. It was its eyes. Empty. Black. And in those black eyes, I saw something that made my blood run cold. I saw myself. "We've been waiting," the figure said, its voice a rasp that seemed to echo in my bones. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. My body, which had once been my only companion on the road, now felt as if it no longer belonged to me. I was an observer in my own skin, helpless to react as the figure, that haunting creature, stood before me. Its eyes, black, as the void that had surrounded me for so long, were locked on mine. And in those empty depths I saw something I couldn't comprehend. I saw myself. The realization struck me like a thunderclap. This wasn't just any figure. This wasn't some wandering lost soul. No, this creature standing in front of me, it was me. At least, it looked like me. Its clothes were the same as mine, the same worn jacket, the same faded jeans, the same boots that had trudged through miles and miles of asphalt and dust. But the face that was now staring back at me with hollow eyes, it wasn't mine, it couldn't be. The creature's mouth stretched open, revealing a row of jagged, broken teeth that looked far too sharp for comfort. Its voice was like the grinding of metal, low and rasping, vibrating in my very chest. "We've been waiting," it repeated, its voice a mocking echo of my own thoughts. "You've always been here, haven't you?" I could feel the weight of its words pressing against my ribs, suffocating me with an unbearable truth. Something inside of me stirred, an ancient, primal feeling that urged me to turn away, to flee. But where would I go? There was nowhere. To run. There was no road anymore. There was no escape. The figure reached out, its hand unnaturally long, the fingers twisting and stretching as if they were made of something that wasn't quite human. It touched the side of the truck with a soft thud, the impact sending a shudder through the metal. "You think you're different," it crooned, its voice dripping with sarcasm. "You think this is all some kind of accident, some mistake. But it's not. This road, this journey, we're all part of it. The road never ends, you see. It swallows everything. And when it swallows enough, it becomes you." I could feel the coldness in the air growing thicker, the darkness pressing in from all sides. It was as if the very essence of this place, the land, the sky, the truck, was alive, breathing, waiting. And in that moment I realized the truth of what the creature had said. I wasn't just driving. I wasn't just traveling along some lonely highway anymore. I had become part of it. The truck, the road, the darkness, they were all pieces of me now, and I was a part of them, bound by something far darker than I had ever imagined. The figure stepped closer, its footfalls so soft that they were barely audible, like the faintest whisper of a breeze. I wanted to scream, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I felt a strange pull, a force that seemed to be drawing me toward it, drawing me deeper into this place, this nightmare. "You think you're in control," it continued, its voice now barely a whisper, "but you never were. You're just another lost soul, another piece of the highway." Suddenly the world around me shifted again. The barren landscape before me began to distort, the ground cracking open, revealing what lay beneath. The cracks were filled with dark, swirling smoke, as if the earth itself was rotting from the inside out. I could hear something beneath the surface, a deep, rumbling growl, like something ancient and terrible was awakening. The truck began to shake again, the metal groaning as though it were alive, struggling to keep itself together. I grabbed the wheel tighter, but my hands felt like they didn't belong to me anymore. They were cold, stiff and unresponsive, as if I were fading away, becoming one with the truck, one with the road, one with whatever darkness was waiting for me. The creature's eyes glowed brighter, its form beginning to shimmer and warp, its features melting and reforming like liquid. Its voice, no longer just a whisper, became a cacophony of screams, a chorus of agony that seemed to reverberate through the very air itself. "We've been waiting for you," the figure hissed, its face now completely formless, a swirling mass of shadows and teeth. "Waiting for you to understand, waiting for you to see. This is your end, but also your beginning. You are the road, and you always have been. I tried to scream, to fight, to escape, but it was no use. The creature, the truck, the road, they were all parts of the same thing now, a never-ending nightmare that had consumed me whole. The rumbling from beneath the earth grew louder, and the cracks in the ground spread wider, revealing the true horror of what lay beneath. It was no longer a world I recognized. It was no longer the world I had known. It was a place outside of time, outside of everything. A place where the boundaries between reality and nightmare had been completely erased. I was no longer a truck driver. I was no longer anything at all. I had become part of the void, part of the endless road that twisted through the dark, pulling me deeper with every passing second. And just when I thought I couldn't take it any longer, when the weight of everything, the darkness, the hopelessness, had completely consumed me, I heard it. Her voice, soft and distant, calling my name, but it wasn't the creature's voice. No, this voice was different. It was human. Help me. The voice echoed through the truck's cabin, filling the space with an overwhelming sense of desperation. It was a plea, a cry for help. For a moment I thought I imagined it, but then the voice spoke again, clearer this time. Please, help me. It sounded familiar. It sounded like her. My wife. The realization hit me like a freight train, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something other than fear. I felt hope. The voice, the call, it was her. It had to be. She had to be out there. I didn't know how or why, but I knew one thing. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't remain trapped in this endless cycle, this twisted road. I had to find her. Slammed my foot on the accelerator, though it felt like I wasn't the one in control anymore. The truck lurched forward, the engine roaring to life as I sped down the desolate highway, leaving the figure behind. The earth cracked open beneath me, but I didn't look back. I couldn't. But the voice was still there, calling me, guiding me, urging me on. The road stretched before me, unyielding, as if it had been waiting for me to pick up speed, to move. Faster. The truck's engine roared beneath me, and the heavy vibrations reverberated through my bones. I could feel every inch of the metal frame beneath my hands, the wheel cold against my palms, the seat beneath me too solid and too alive. It was as if the truck itself was desperate to move, desperate to escape whatever it was that had pulled us into this realm. And still, the voice, my wife's voice, rang in my ears. Help me. I could almost feel her presence behind me, an invisible force pushing me forward. There was no mistaking it now. The way she had said my name, the urgency in her voice, it had been real. She was out there. Somewhere in the distance, somewhere beyond the horizon, waiting for me to find her. The road twisted and turned, winding like a snake across the barren land, but it was no longer just a road. It was something else now, something alien. The pavement was cracked and broken, as though it had been weathered by time itself. And the darkness, it seemed to press in from all sides, a suffocating force that made the air thick and oppressive. But no matter how hard I tried to focus on the road, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me, something that had always been there, lurking just out of sight. And then, the road began to change. It was subtle at first, just a slight shift in the texture beneath the tires. But then the colors around me began to blur, distorting as the air grew heavier, more suffocating. The landscape seemed to fade, becoming a haze of shadow and light, and the faintest whisper of wind blew through the truck's cabin, carrying with it a smell that made my stomach churn, something rotting, something decayed. It was the smell of death. The voice, my wife's voice, grew louder, more desperate, more urgent. She was closer now. I could feel it, I could sense it in the air. The truck's speed increased as if responding to the pull, as though it were somehow connected to her, connected to the force that drew us both forward. And then, it happened. Chaka. Truck's headlights flickered. At first I thought it was just a malfunction, a simple glitch in the system. But then it happened again, more violently this time, as if something otherworldly was interfering with the truck's electrical systems. I slammed my hand against the dashboard, but it did nothing. The lights went out completely, plunging us into complete darkness. I couldn't see anything now, not even the faint glow of the road ahead. I had no idea if the truck was even moving anymore, or if I had just been swallowed by the void. The only thing I could hear was the pounding of my heart and the faint, distorted echo of my wife's voice. Help me. Please. I'm so scared. It was like I could feel her fear seeping through the air, wrapping around me like a vice. The air was suffocating now, and my chest tightened as I gasped for breath. But no matter how much I inhaled, the air was thin and cold, like I was suffocating inside a tomb. I fumbled for the ignition, my fingers shaking as I tried to start the truck again, but it was no use. The truck had stalled. "You shouldn't have come." The voice was no longer just my wife's. It was something else, something darker, something that seemed to emanate from the very air around me. It was the voice of the road. The truck lurched forward, as if responding to the command, but the sound of the truck was now warped, distorted, like the engine itself had been twisted into something monstrous. The faint hum of the motor sounded like a low growl, a predatory noise that filled the air with an overwhelming sense of dread. The voice came again, clearer now. It was no longer calling for help. Now it was laughing. A low, guttural chuckle, filled with malice. "You can't save her. You can't save anyone." I felt the truck move again, not under my control, but like it was being pulled by some invisible force. I tried to grip the wheel, but my hands were numb. I couldn't move. I couldn't escape. The truck surged forward, the road beneath me shifting and warping with every mile, the landscape around me distorting in ways that made no sense. The road seemed to fold into itself, looping back in impossible directions, creating an endless, unbroken circuit that led nowhere. And then, ahead of me, I saw something. A light. It was faint at first, just a glimmer in the distance, but it grew, brighter as I drove toward it, casting long, jagged shadows across the road. The glow was cold, unnerving, like it had no warmth, no life. The closer I got, the more it pulled me as if it were alive, calling me closer, guiding me toward it. But something about that light was wrong. The glow was unnatural, a sickly yellow, that flickered like a dying flame. And as I got closer, I realized something else. It wasn't a light at all. It was a figure. It stood in the center of the road, its silhouette barely visible against the backdrop of darkness. The figure was tall, thin and hunched, its limbs twisting in ways that defied human anatomy. Its head was tilted at an odd angle, and its face was obscured by a black hood, a shadow that seemed to pulse with life. I slammed on the brakes, but it was too late. The truck lurched forward, as if something inside it was guiding it straight, into the figure. And then, just as I was about to crash into it, just as I was about to die, the figure turned. Its face was revealed. It was my wife. Her eyes were wide, frantic, her face pale and bloodless, her mouth open in a scream that didn't come out. There was no sound. There was no air. The world around me stood still as I stared at her, trapped in a moment that seemed to stretch on forever. And then, just as quickly, she was gone. The truck slammed to a halt. The world went silent. I was alone again. In the dark. I couldn't process what had just happened. One moment I was hurtling toward the figure, my wife, and the next she was gone, vanished like smoke in the wind. The truck sat motionless on the cracked, uneven road, the engine still running but barely audible in the sudden, overwhelming silence. The headlights flickered weakly, casting strange, elongated shadows across the barren wasteland that surrounded me. I was alone, or at least I thought I was. But as I sat there in the stillness, something began to shift. The air around me felt thick, as if the very atmosphere was holding its breath, waiting for something, anything to happen. The road stretched endlessly ahead of me, but there was no longer any sense of direction, no sense of time. And then I heard it again, that faint whisper echoing through the void. "You never left." The voice was so close I could feel it brush against my skin. I turned quickly, expecting to see the figure standing there, but there was nothing. Just the empty road, the fading glow of the truck's headlights, and the oppressive weight of the darkness. The voice came again, louder this time, but it wasn't my wife's voice anymore. It was the same voice I had heard when I first stepped onto this road, the voice of the highway itself. "You're not meant to leave. None of us are." A chill ran down my spine as the words sank in. The realization hit me like a brick to the chest. I wasn't just driving down a highway anymore. I had never been on a highway at all. The road was a trap, an endless loop, designed to keep me here forever. I had become part of it. A part of the road, part of the darkness, part of whatever twisted, malevolent force had claimed me from the start. I tried to scream, to fight, but it was no use. The darkness pressed in from all sides, suffocating, crushing, until I could no longer see the headlights or the truck. I couldn't see anything at all. It was just me now, alone in the vast, unyielding void. The highway had consumed everything. There was no escape. The road had taken me, body and soul, and I would never leave.